Well, hello there. You're very welcome to this, which is Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which a friend of mine has chosen a Doctor Who story. I have to bang on during it and try to guess what their favourite things about each instalment are.
Hello. I'm Richard James, actor, writer, podcast co-host of the Jerry Anderson podcast, and I have a story for Toby. I've chosen The Visitation.
Right then, this is podcast host man speaking to podcast listener man or woman, trying not to be boring man, but being interesting man. Yes, we're in the world of The Visitation, where everyone is known by their job title or race, if you're one of the aliens. So we are racing for the conclusion. God, I can remember the room in my mum's, in our house. It was always a very cold house, so there was always a fire on. So it always seemed like winter, even if it wasn't. And the cold, dark nights is what I associate Doctor Who with. Cold, dark nights, a roaring fire. And the room that we called the study in our house, because it'd been my dad's study, but he wasn't there anymore, so it got transformed into the sort of the room where the family watched a black and white portable telly, where you had to turn a dial to go from channel to channel and hope that the picture stayed stable. And you had to fiddle with the aerial if the weather was bad. All sorts of things that you young whippersnappers don't understand. Instead, what you have is a system entirely reliant. Well, that's what we have now, because we don't have a telly plugged in. We get it all through the internet. So if the internet goes off, you can't do anything. I mean, you can't do anything, which I think it's like TMAT. I think there's a flaw. I'm all for having something plugged in that you can bash, because you also bash the telly sometimes if it didn't work. Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure people will look back on some 50 years time and go, what? So if the internet was off, it meant that nothing in their house worked properly anymore. Yep, idiots. What savages they were. Yes, you have to be careful, iPhone man, not to get too reliant on that technology. Anyway, I am going to watch, yes, The Visitation, episode 4, and we will press play in 3, 2, 1. See, there we go. The projector that I'm watching this on was connected to a speaker, and then temporarily wasn't, and now it is again. You see all this technology. It's marvelous, and then one day the machine stops. Oh, have you read The Machine Stops? E.M. Forster. There's an episode of Out of the Unknown based on it, starring Yvonne Mitchell, directed wonderfully by Philip Saville. But I read the short story. It's basically about the internet breaking down. It's a fabulous piece of writing. There's something now I haven't even really mentioned. The episode starts with the line, a final visitation. It's the visitation, a final visitation. And it's also the final part of the visitation. And I quite like the fact that, the terror... I mean, it's quite sort of mass murder, isn't it? To go, there's 3 of us who need somewhere to live. We will happily destroy everybody on this planet in order to give us quite an airy home. So what's their plan? Is it just to kill everybody in England? Just to kill everybody in the vicinity of London? Or are they hoping it spreads everywhere? I think he looks great, even just in the doorway, shutting there. But I haven't mentioned the rats. Rats are spooky things. We live near an alleyway, and so you occasionally see rats, and it's a slightly disturbing idea that not very far away from where I dwell and where my food is, there are rats, and I know rats are intelligent and I love a spark, just like I love a laser beam. I love a spark, and Davison's very good at that. The way that he twists the thing to make to emit the sparks. He doesn't just press it; he gives it. He sort of pinches it and holds it in a certain way that the acting helps sell the fact that he's discharging the power pack or whatever it is that he's doing, because he's a very, very nifty actor. So there you get a good look at James Charlton doing hypnotized acting. But yes, you should now go, yes, he's the guy that draws the clock face of Romana. Beautiful restored film here. Those lush greens and the sort of burgundies and browns of the villagers is a really nice contrast. I know it was only made for small. I mean, gosh, as I say, I would have watched this in black and white, and it wasn't made for the big screen. I'm watching it on quite a large projection. I'm a man of iron. I think I may have occasionally used that line. Now, I never quite understand this bit. Oh yes, safety pin. That's nice as well. Oh yeah, no, it's not this bit. There's a bit with the door that I've never quite understood. Extricate my fee from the strong boxes of more than one disreputable theatre manager is lovely. And I like the fact that Richard Mace, who's been sort of irritating the Doctor for quite often, is actually succeeds in undoing the handcuffs. That's a great image of the pteroleptil. It's very bold to go, let's just have our alien in full sight, riding a horse and cart. But I love that. Again, it's the juxtaposition. Yeti Lou tooting beck, pteroleptil, horse and cart, village. And as I record this, Tegan has just come back to Doctor Who. We're recording this after The Power of the Doctor, and Janet Fielding back, feisty as ever. It was good to see her back. Oh, the Sonic. Do you know what? The Sonic. I'd forgotten the Sonic. So gets its final appearance actually in episode 4. I always think about the destruction in episode 3. Yes, this is the bit I don't quite understand, because I don't get this bit about he shoots the door lock and it's above. I don't understand. I just don't understand. I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. It's nice that we have the shot and the little bit blows out, and that's nicely timed and that works. Yes, is there something I don't know about locks that suggests that that is the reason why the bullet has opened the door? Maybe I'm just being a bit thick. Maybe Doctor Who is educating me that old doors had the lock a handspan above the device. Or it's a bit of business or a joke. I don't understand. Oh gosh, I've just had a memory. I remember watching this with my sister. And this bit here, when Nissa turns it on, I'm sure if it wasn't this bit here, it was when she switches it off. She said, there was a gap between her flicking the switch and the shaking, either stopping and finishing. And is it this bit? I felt then that she'd imagined it, and it's that it's an early manifestation in my life of people watching to sort of go pick holes, and you go, even if she did, you have to be looking for it, or you have to decide that that's what it's doing. And why? I remember my son's talking about video games. I think I've mentioned this before, or looking online for movie gaffes and some it is quite fun to occasionally spot those things, but to sort of go looking or to make the assumption that because quite often you read in these list of mistakes on IMDb, they quite often will list a mistake and you go, that's not a mistake, you've just misunderstood that, like you don't know that where the lock on a medieval door is, but this desire to sort of look at something and find fault with it is I suppose it's because I make stuff. I just sort of think, oh, give us a break and be transport. Give us the benefit of the doubt. This is a nice image actually of the miller in with his little flintlock. What is it? What are those guns called? Flintlock, musket? No, musket's a bigger one. In the contrasting. He's doing the opposite of what the pteroleptil was doing. The monster in the English countryside. The miller from the olden days against the glistening, clean, white, spaceship stuff that is sort of also against the Rock. I like all of that. I think that's nicely Doctor Who stuff. Very good Davison stuff there, of where he sounds like he's just allowed to lose his temper. It's a lovely little piece of texture to the acting. He sort of goes, "Will you?" And his voice goes so high it's almost going to break with sort of frustration and annoyance and anger. And then he pauses and gathers himself and then tries to be over polite. He adds that's a great image of death in the forest. Wonderful. That's another lovely Doctor Who-y thing. I do think the android is very effective, and that's that's a good piece of conception on the writer's behalf. Going, well, I can give my alien machine free passage if it disguises itself as death, and that scares off any villagers, creates an effective sci-fi image, ties it in with the time I'm setting in the story. Yeah, it's a really effective part of it. I like that. The lighting's very nice in here. It's got a sort of green hue to suggest that the pteroleptils like lighting stuff the same colour as them. But again, it's a nice visual shorthand, and it gives it a nice, interesting sort of colour palette and tone that contrasts with the atmosphere in different locations in this story. I think that's really effective. Good lighting, well done. He's great, Davison. Why didn't I like him? Because he wasn't Tom Baker. Change, you see. I like the music. And I was in love with Nyssa. And I like things like the TARDIS toolbox. Those were things you could sort of draw and think about, and maybe make a list about, and you're sort of thinking, why didn't you make toys of this sort of stuff? It's because Doctor Who was popular. 9 million, was it 7? But a lot of people were watching Doctor Who at this time period, and there was so little to buy, which seems insane now when you think about it, especially when there was sort of Star Wars figures and those sorts of things. And I know when the Dapples came out, they didn't sort of sell brilliantly and all of that sort of thing. But is it because, and the Dennis Fisher ones, I don't think set the world alight. So why was it that Star Wars figures sold so much, and yet Doctor Who, which was watched by a lot of people and had and we know now it sells figures. I mean, maybe Destroyed Cassandra and Granny from the Idiot's Lantern aside, if my local Forbidden Planets excess stock was anything to go by, still regret not buying both of those. Was that? I think it was that one that my sister said, and maybe she was on something. It doesn't. Who cares? Love the android. And there's great pictures of this in the Doctor Who: The Making of a Television Program, of I'm sure of the explosion. That's a neat little effect of it's just somebody pulling at the doily, but that's it's all clever stuff to add to the illusion. And we get a few laser shots here, but there we go. That's and I do like that. It's going out of control. There we go. I do like Nyssa. Well, I like the fact that they've got a fire extinguisher. I mean, you would You're traveling through space and time. You would have a fire extinguisher just in case something blows up, but it also again seems quite quaint, like the whole, very fun. You've got a bedside table with nothing on it there. It's sort of quaint functionality. It's quite amusing, but I do like the fact that Nyssa sort of laments the destruction of the beautiful and impressive creation that was the android, and well done, Peter Van Dissel, for making it quite a sort of scary and scrutable presence just through body language. But it's a great conception, both as death and as the bejeweled, bejeweled armored automaton that lies beneath. And I like that. Nyssa gives it a suitable send-off. So the doctor laments his screwdriver, and Nyssa laments the destruction of the android. So there's a lot of machines whose passing is a source of regret in this story, and I think that's quite sweetly Doctor Who-y as well. I don't think there's many episodes of EastEnders where somebody's sad about a car, or many episodes of the Archers where they cry about a combine harvester, or indeed any episodes of Line of Duty where somebody's sad about a microwave. I loved her so much. I wanted her to marry me, and now I've been to her house. I've moved on, but she was a very early object of my affection, was Nyssa, Sarah Sutton, which is weird because I think I've often ended up with people whose temperament is closer to Tegan's than to Nyssa's. Nyssa's very amenable and lovely, and Tegan, who's quite feisty, and I feel I've very much been the cowed person in my relationships. I've not really been the one who's in charge. So maybe I should have tried to hook up with Nyssa, because I think she would have. I would have perhaps not been quite so pathetic. There's a lot of scenes in the TARDIS in this period, which is a good use of resources. But I was talking about the Cartmel era the other day, and its depletion of the TARDIS scenes, which I think was a good move, because there's a lot of TARDIS stuff that is sort of redundant, certainly in the sort of setups and closings of stories that you'd really trim now. But I did find the TARDIS quite reassuring, and I do like the gag that I'd forgotten because I was talking about hitting the television. I do like the gag. I do love that about the TARDIS, that it doesn't quite work properly and you have to hit it to make it work properly. That, to me, is what makes Doctor Who more than any other programme that might try to be like Doctor Who. It's that sort of charm of the ramshackle. I've mentioned this before. The idea that imperfection is somehow is somehow winning in both senses of the words. The Doctor wins often by mistake or lash ups, but it's also winning. It's sort of charming. It's disarming, because it is an amazing, miraculous machine that travels through space and time, and it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, but it doesn't quite work properly. It doesn't do what you want it to do, and therefore you have to rely on your wits, and occasionally it lets you down at the worst possible moment, like life, and you have to be rueful about it. The Doctor is rueful about that, rather than bitchy or angry, and that is a good lesson in life. This is a beautiful set here. This is a triumph, this. Well done, Ken Starkey. This is all on film, and it looks absolutely terrific, and it's setting us up for this flaming climax. And the lighting in here is because we're afforded the extra resources on film. This looks absolutely magnificent, and you've got the red of the furnace setting us up for the fire. contrasting with the green of the pteroleptils in base that I was discussing earlier, and the much brighter TARDIS-esque lighting here. It's quite sweet that he's got the old map. And this, of course, brings us to the conclusion of the story and the wheeze. How do I feel about that map? Would the TARDIS have an old map? Yeah, I suppose you would. You would go, but a TARDIS would translate it, wouldn't it, into Google, Street View, wouldn't it? But I suppose it's helping to embed us in the time. And again, it's got what I like, that thing of something very oldie worldy on a spanking futuristic scanner screen. Anything where the TARDIS is juxtaposed with well, I mean, that's the beauty of that shape. It looks kind of incongruous, and yet it kind of fits everywhere. It fits within its incongruity, on a beach, against thatched cottages, or in a spaceship. It looks like a slightly modern interloper here. It looks like a quaint old-fashioned thing in a spangly spaceship. It kind of sticks out everywhere, but without looking silly. It looks sort of charmingly displaced. Now I remember when I got this on video. It was my friend Dave Merrick who I think lent me the Visitation, and I think he must have got his via someone in Australia. Oh, I like the fact that the other two pteroleptils, one of whom is Michael Leader, who was the milkman or postman in EastEnders, who only died a few years ago. I used to see Michael a lot in the Club for Acts and Actors. He was a big whiskey drinker, and he was a stormtrooper as well. But he was a regular at the Club for Acts and Actors, and it had actually been suggested to him that he do an interview, and I hadn't actually spoken to him ever then, and he sort of said no, not for me. And I thought, oh, maybe he's a bit snooty, but actually he towards the end of his life he sort of started to join us, and we had right old chats and everything. And because he was part of the furniture, I was like, oh, I'll speak to him at some point, and then he died, having had he got a few lines when Peggy Mitchell left EastEnders. He occasionally got a line, but he was largely a supporting artist, and he's one of these two pteroleptils, and I love the fact that they've got their own colour scheme, because it shows that an effort has gone into giving them their own look and their own personality, and they look good. They're Tegan bludgeoning one to death with a rifle. I think there's a good picture of her doing that in rehearsal as well. That looks quite cool. And oh yes, and Dave, my friend Dave, who lent me this. And I love the little pulse of the light. That's very good. And of course the gun and the straw is all on film, but it marries quite nice. It marries very nicely with the videotape, and the burning face of the pteroleptil was not on my copy. So it was only when I got this on DVD that I was reminded of the kind of horrible melty, because there's quite a few sort of green melty faces oozing green stuff in this era, but I'd forgotten that this was one of them, and it wasn't in the copy that I had. Oh yeah, there we are. That's vile. That's really hot. He's still alive. His skin's popping and melting. That's glorious, but it's pretty grim. And this is all great because it's practical effects. I will stay and fight the fire. I love that. And he does that great Robert Newton eye thing. He's been wonderful as Michael Robbins. Definitely, I think that the probably the strongest thing about the adventure in all. Well, I was going to say that because he's the sort of standout character, but actually I found much to distract me that isn't him, like I think the pteroleptil and the pteroleptil leader, the android, and I think that fire, I think you could tell that fire's, actually not really there, or is it on the end of a doodah? But actually, I think all that fire stuff's very well done. All the film work is nicely, and unusually the film work, because of the effectiveness of the lighting in studio, actually matches with everything else, and that is a great wheeze. Now, I knew about Pudding Lane, I think, because we were a house that talked about such things, and maybe we'd learnt it at school at that point, but that just makes you go, oh, as a kid, and it's one of those brilliant things, and of Doctor Who fulfilling its initial remit of going, of taking us into history and learning about historical events. Now, yes, the bubonic plague wasn't wiped out as the result of a load of... Oh, James Charlton gets a single billing because there's nobody else in the episode much. Pudding Lane was not set on fire as a result of an alien incursion and attempts by 3 alien fugitives to wipe out the human race using a plague. But it makes you interested in the period. It makes you, if you know it, it makes you feel good. As a kid, I remember feeling great that I knew what that was referring to, and I felt clever. And I like the fact that a television program can sort of rely on the fact that a lot of kids watching would put 2 and 2 together and go, oh, wow, that's amazing. And those that didn't could have it explained to them, and that might interest them in history or whatever. So, yeah, the Pudding Lane is a great little coda and a great way of, bringing this adventure to a close and having the Doctor play a little part in the making of history. Now, I wouldn't want the Doctor to do that all the time. I don't want the Doctor to have been involved in every single moment of history, but when it does touch things like the Mary Celeste and Pudding Lane and the sort of things that we learnt about as kids, that were in the air as kids as things you should know about or fascinating facts or whatever, it just seemed to add to the great sort of tapestry of sort of interesting things. It just made life interesting. It made history interesting. It made stories interesting. It made stories that came out of facts interesting. And I love that. It's a beautiful way to end the story. I love the mixture. I love that the pseudo-historicals, we call them now, where you throw something science fiction into an historical period, and it actually elevates the fact that, some of that was spent in, tedious villagerdom to go, actually, no, this is actually tied in with slightly more momentous events. I still think it would have been an interesting story without that, but and if you do that thing too often, it's an occurrence of diminishing returns. You don't want the Doctor to be involved with everything, but I think that is pitched just right. It's a beautiful final shot, and nice, good ending. So I've got to choose 2 things. My favourite thing about that episode is, I think, the tying in with the Great Fire of London. And I'd forgotten, actually, how effective those final scenes are. I think that film work is beautiful. And the lighting is exceptionally good all through the story, actually. And but I think those final film scenes, that the battle between the last 3 pteroleptils were pleasingly different coloured. The pulsing of the gun, the fire, the popping of the face of the pteroleptil, and it's sort of teeth, its white teeth and sort of gnarled lips shining through the sort of blistering inferno. It's pretty grim. It's excellent. Love a bit of that. Especially as it's not something I'm that used to seeing, because my copy did not have that. I remember being and I'd seen it originally. But for whatever reason, I didn't remember the plasmatons. I remember, but maybe that was just my subconscious shutting them out. But anyway, yeah. So I think maybe I'd just forgotten. And then when of course, when I did get the DVD and it was oh no, yes, of course that did happen. So it had slumbered. It had certainly not burnt itself, into my memory. So yeah, I think the sort of climax of the Inferno and the fact that the Inferno takes place at Pudding Lane, that then sort of echoes back right to the beginning of the story and go, well, why are we setting this in a time of plague? I think the whole fact of the period in which it is set, and the fact that it takes us to that denouement, which when you think about it, you could sort of see coming, but actually I didn't as a kid, and I don't think it's too obvious now. I don't think it overplays its hand with that. I think it's neat. So yes, the fact that it's set during the plague, the fact that the climax is in the Great Fire of London, and the fact that it gives us that lovely little coda to make any kid who likes feeling that they know something that the adults have put together or whatever, or that they know something that's in a story that they're watching, or that that moment, oh yes, of course, I think is great, because it's good storytelling, but it's also great because it's Doctor Who doing the Sidney Newman thing, being a bit Reithian as you can be, informing, educating, and entertaining. But yeah, being as Reithian as you can be when you've got 3 reptile monsters, one of whom's played by the barman of the Old Vic, and one of whom is played by its milkman. Fighting, a series of an air hostess, a mathematical genius, a princess of Traken, and a Time Lord, and an out-of-work thespian highwayman. I mean, what's not to love? So, and talking of the out-of-work thespian highwayman, my bonus thing, my overall thing, who I do think is the strongest thing on the story, although Michael Melia and the Pteroleptil leader spoke to me a lot during this story. I think they really are standouts, but I kind of acknowledge them in episode 3. Well, episodes 2 and 3, the costume and the burnt face was my episode 2 choice, the face-offs were my episode 3 choice. So poor old Michael Melia misses out on a nomination, but he should, I'm sure he doesn't give a monkeys, but his performance is all part of the great success of who I think is a superb nemesis, the Pteroleptil leader. But I think you have to, and because he divides people, and because he gets a bit of a hard time on the commentary, largely because he clearly wasn't a huge fan of doing the show and spent all his time moaning. I don't care. Michael Robbins was a great actor. He was a very reassuring presence on telly. You saw him in a lot. A wonderful voice, and I think he's great as Richard Mace, who I think is a wonderfully written character. Fortune has made me itinerant. He's one of those I sort of like, sort of slightly overblown actor type characters. They're the sort of characters I like to play as well. What are you playing? A very over the top actor. But does that mean you're being one? No, I'm playing one. So therefore, any of my excesses are due to the character I'm playing and nothing to do with my style of performance. What a joy! What a ripe old turn it is. Although he does mute stuff on occasion, he's a little bit of afraid of some of the dramatic-y, sci-fi stuff, which is interesting, which makes it a slightly offbeat performance in places. But I think he has his rich tones, and he's got a lot of fun. And I also quite like the fact that the Doctor really finds him irritating. But that actually you like him, and you like him in the end, and he stays and fights the fire, and that they give him that little present. I mean, what he's supposed to do with that, I've got no idea. The floppy disk or whatever it is that he's given. But yeah, all good. And so Richard Mace is my bonus thing, and my thing for this episode is all that stuff I said about plagues and fires of London. Let's see what Richard has to say.
Episode 4 would have to be the disintegration of the android by Nyssa using a machine that seems to be made up of her old hairdryer and some rubber bands and a reel of sellotape. I quite like the android. It comes in for a lot of stick. Design-wise, I know it fell rather short of the original design that was in mind, but I remember being struck by it at the time, cricket gloves notwithstanding. It's a rather beautiful piece, I think. Very colourful and alien, certainly. Really stands out in, 17th century England as an anachronistic object, which I really love. So the android disintegrating would be my moment from episode 4.
Well, yes, and having gone to great pains to say I'm sorry about the pteroleptil that I've not chosen, I'm also sorry about the android, because again, in another story, I think, the android would have been a major plus. I think it looks fantastic. I don't have a problem with the design, like Richard said, cricket gloves notwithstanding, but I think it's intelligently realised. All those jewels. They've read the script and gone, oh, well, they like beauty. And Peter Van Dissel's body language is very good, and yes, the juxtaposition between what it looks like and the things it stands in front of is great, and it's got laser fingers. I love the android, and I think that the scene where Nyssa blows it up is very good. But I didn't choose that, and all of that I think earns us. I keep moaning about it's just that first 10 minutes of episode 3 where it's a bit annoying and with those sort of cardboard villagers. I suppose the fact that they're so sort of bland and could be from any sort of naff, period drama of, squabbling peasants. The fact that the sci-fi elements are so well done to juxtapose with that sort of helps the idea that, the sci-fi stuff is futuristic and complex in a way that, we looked at the past as being full of, rather simpler people, which is, of course, hugely patronising. And dramas work much better if you help us to identify with, if any of us could have grown up in a village in the 17th century, and we would have still had our intuition and rationality and all of those sorts of things. We would have expressed them in different ways, and our morality would have been shaped differently, but we wouldn't all be a bit fake. But, these are the tropes of 40-year-old drama and all of that sort of thing. So I'm not going to patronise the past by saying, well, we don't do that now. And actually, yes, those bits that I liked a bit less, they do actually help to enhance the more interesting, the more colourful, the better realised, which is the futuristic stuff, which I think is as it should be. And I love that android.
And finally, a bonus thing that I liked about the Visitation, well, it would have to be Michael Robbins' portrayal of the thespian turned highwayman Richard Mace. A rather fruity, lovely performance. He's a brilliant foil to Peter Davison's Doctor, and they share many a scene together, locked up in a cell and so on, where they get a chance to sort of spark off each other, and the dialogue's fantastic, and their performances are lovely. So, I'd like to finish with that. Michael Robbins' performance as Richard Mace.
Oh, well, there we go. So we end in a chord. Our flames intertwine around the idol that is Michael Robbins as Richard Mace. And actually, when I was putting this out on Patreon, I put out one of the earlier episodes. One of my patrons informed me, said, "Did you release this on Michael Robbins' birthday on purpose?" No, it would have been his 92nd birthday, which is weird because I know some people who are sort of 94, 95. Well, I know somebody who's 98 and in fine fettle, Mr. Ollis from the Green Death. And you think, but Michael Robbins died years ago. And you think, gosh, so the life that he, it's still conceivable he would be alive now at 92 and have fitted in, God, what, so much. And yet, when he died, it didn't seem unlikely that he would have died because he seemed quite old then, and of course he smoked like a trooper, so that's gonna add to that. So it's odd that there's a whole. I mean, I was at university, I think, when he died, so there's a whole lot of lifetime for me in the time that Michael Robbins did die, and now where he could still be alive and in functioning in fine fettle, which gives me a lot to think about. But I'm not sure what I think about it. But it's probably not very nice, or a bit sad, or a bit wistful, or just, well, there we go. Anyway, Michael Robbins, long dead, but will live forever as Richard Mace. And he lives forever in the hearts of both Richard and I, which, seeing as I haven't done particularly well with this Happy Times and Places, where, a reminder, I'm supposed to try to guess more of the things that my guest is going to choose than fewer, because if I choose fewer, I don't win. I never win. I think I've won once, but it's not the winning, it's the taking part. But, or at least ending on a positive note, which is that Richard and I both chose Richard. Richard James and I both chose Richard Mace. And let's now allow Richard, who's been a splendid guest, to plug his wares.
Now, Toby's also very kindly said, if you've got anything to plug, now is the time to do it. So if you would be interested in a series of Victorian detective novels, well, I've written some, as chance would have it, and you can find out all about them at Bowman of the Yard, Bowman, bowmanoftheyard.co.uk. Bye for now.
Well, Bowman of the Yard, he's plugged very effectively there. I've not had the pleasure, so I should really, and I hope his contribution has drawn you to his wares, because I think we were all cut from the same cloth. I was delighted. I hadn't realised Richard was a sort of fan. He's one of those many creative people who has been inspired by this ridiculous, wonderful, lovely show, Doctor Who, that makes people make costumes, write stories, want to strut their stuff on the stage and become an actor, and if that doesn't work out well, to turn to highway personage. So that's the way things are going for me. You might find me up a tree. And Richard is a splendid writer and a splendid actor. He's in most of the episodes of Space Precinct, about which he wrote in his excellent book, which talks about the fact that was a series that did have a difficult gestation and was eventually pulled, but he writes about it with great insight and great affection, and it's a really well put together chronicle of a show that I only sort of I sort of enjoyed, but didn't give it that much thought to, but I absolutely loved his book. So I'll plug his book as well, and his podcast, and go and avail yourself of what Richard has to offer, because it's a lot. He's also a lovely chap who I've never actually met in the flesh, and that's another thing about this brave new world in which we live, is that you can consider people chums without actually ever being in the same room as them. But I think we inhabit the same sort of mental plane, and I look forward to the day when one day I can shake Richard's hands. But for the moment, I just have to wave to him across cyberspace, thank him for taking part in Happy Times and Places, which I do to you as well, lovely listener. Thank you for putting this. There's so much out there in cyberspace that you could listen to. You've chosen to listen to an out of work actor who's robbing you of a little of your time by talking to you in a very one-way conversation about Doctor Who. But it's very nice to know that you're there, and I'm grateful to you. And until the next visitation, may all your times and places, from me, that is, until my next visitation into your lugholes, may all your times and places be happy and not on fire. I'm very grateful indeed to you for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Richard James, who, as you heard, has work that can be found at bowmanoftheyard.co.uk, but he's also online at richardjamesonline.com and on Twitter at Richard N. James. He's prolific actor, writer, podcast host. Avail yourself of his wares. I'm very grateful to Richard and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. One of those is Trevor Smith. It was Trevor who pointed out Michael Robbins' 92nd birthday, but I couldn't remember just as I was doing my coda there. So thanks to Trevor and to Stephen Moffat, Richard Chalk, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, Jason Gorman and Siobhan Galichon. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Do you want to be a patron like those names that I just read out? then you can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can do all sorts of things, including pointing out that it would have been the 92nd birthday of an actor in the story I, just by coincidence, have released an episode of Happy Times and Places to and by. So thanks to Trevor for doing that. That's actually one of the lovely things about the Patreon, is that, you know, you can leave messages and we can chat and we learn off each other, and you know, there's lots of like-minded people chatting away, you know, provoked by whatever it is that has come up in the various podcasts that come out at least 6 months early if it's a Happy Times and Places, and a month or so, sometimes 6 weeks early for Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information. And you also get one of your own called Far Too Much Information. There's also exclusive material. In fact, I recently released something that I didn't realise was missing from the BBC audio archives. It's now been returned, but the patrons heard it first after I sort of got it out of my drawer. And also monthly AMAs, access, back and forths, all sorts of different bits and bobs at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke for as little as £3 a month. There are higher tiers, but most stuff is available for £3 a month. You can follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, TobyHadoke, and these podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. Again, HADOKE, then podcasts. I've got my own website, tobyhadoke.com, that's got various bits and bobs on it. It might just fun to look at. Is it fun to look at? No. Well, it's very beautifully designed by the splendid Slate Media, who is the lovely Matt Evenden. Yeah, he's done a better job than... well, it's what he does for a living. He's done a better job than I could have done. Well, yeah, in the same way that a Michelin-starred chef could do a better job of cooking Michelin-starred food than I can, because it's what they do. So, yeah, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? And I also have a page on Ko-fi.com for those of you that might not fancy the monthly commitment of Patreon, but also, you know, might feel the occasional need to... throw me a metaphorical coffee. That's what it is, Ko-fi. It's a coffee. It's like you're buying me a coffee to say thank you for whatever this is. And that's at Ko-fi, which is Ko-fi, Ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. Or you can do the thing that is free, and that is to give these 5 stars. Toby Hadoke's Time Travels, give them 5 stars everywhere you go. Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, wherever you digest your podcasts. Leave a tip in the shape of 5 lovely stars. The 5 stars really help to make passers-by notice these, maybe be curious and have a look. And if you leave a few lines of review, that helps too, because the more people that listen, the more it justifies me sitting up at 1:40 in the morning, talking into a microphone and doing whatever this is. Well, I enjoyed that. I've done a few too many season 19s though, but so we've actually done a run, haven't we, from 4 to Doomsday, right through to Black Orchid and Time Flight. So I've actually only got Castrovalva and Earthshock left, and they have both been claimed by people, but they've not been recorded, so I couldn't do them if I wanted to. In fact, Davison-wise, I've got Resurrection of the Daleks recorded, and I've got the King's Demons recorded, i.e. the contribution of guests. Oh, and Caves of Androzani. But I have to, you know. So yeah, they're all good to go. So one of those will be the next Davison. But got a lot of Tom Baker. Well, I've got each Doctor to go through before we do another. But there'll definitely not be a season 19 for quite a while. 1, because I haven't got them, but 2, because I've done too many. But I need to do some new series ones as well, and that's I feel a little bit on the back foot because I haven't managed to subsume myself in facts. Although I didn't really do many facts for this one, did I? I didn't do many production facts. It was filmed at the Tithe Barn in Hurley. That was, where's that come from? That's the Tithe Barn in Hurley. That is part of the location filming for The Visitation. I gave you some bits about the actors, but not an awful lot. It was mostly sort of nostalgia and observation. I shall try to proffer some more facts, but you see, I don't need the facts for this one really, because it's all in Doctor Who: The Making of a Television Program by Alan Rode, which I have sitting upstairs, which has lots of pictures in it. But there's some pictures of some old monsters that I remember being really disappointing because they looked a bit naff, and it's because they're not from past episodes; they're actually from an exhibition. And I remember thinking, well, they don't look very good, and it's because they're not, stills taken on the set. They are of exhibits without actors within. It does make a difference. But yeah, I have images of Michael Robbins with a fag, of Janet Fielding with a prop rifle, in her civvies, and with her own hair, which is, I think, different to Tegan's, different style. It was one of those things that you'd sort of pick over in those long months between TV series, and one of those things that people would buy. I think I might even have a couple of copies of it because some Mum had. I think, or maybe I've just got the one, but that I didn't buy it, and that my mum's friend Paul, who's just a lovely work colleague of my mum's, lovely chap Paul, who Tobe, I saw this at a second-hand shop or whatever, so I thought of you, which is really, aren't people nice? Even now, actually, I think he might actually be my godfather, John. But he was a friend of my dad's, so didn't really see him in adult life. But he always sort of he's always kept in touch, even though he was a friend of my dad's, which always suggested to us that he was kind of acknowledging that your dad did a wrong thing. He left when I was four, and we didn't really see or interact with anybody from sort of his side of proceedings, because I think that was the rule. But John, this fellow John, always kept in touch, and even now, because I think he knows I don't read the Telegraph, and he does, he sends. If ever there's an article in the Telegraph about Doctor Who, I can see his handwriting now. I go, oh, that's from John. And I open it up, and it's I still don't think you get the Telegraph, so you probably didn't see this, which is terribly thoughtful of him. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how you have these sort of satellites of people, and it must be awkward, of course, because they must sort of go. And in fact, I just saw my next. He lives a bit down the road. Ian and Barbara down the road. I have an Ian and Barbara down the road. Isn't that lovely? And he posted a Doctor Who book through my letterbox. And he said it was basic, and he said, "Did you get it?" I went, "Oh yeah, thank you." And he said it was basically, it was a 3 for 2, and there was a book I really wanted. So it was no skin off my nose to get it, and I didn't know if you had it or not, because that's, of course, the awkward thing, and that's what Mum said was always the trouble, was that she didn't know if it, it's hard to tell people what to get me Doctor Who-wise, because if I really wanted it, I'd get it myself. Well, not so much when you were younger, because you couldn't get stuff yourself. I think it's hard now, because largely, books and things are actually a lot sort of comparatively cheaper now, which is why being a writer is a fruitless task, really. And of course, I've got all the episodes now. And also I don't keep up with all the merchandise, just too much. But I like the fact stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's difficult to know what to buy for the Doctor Who fan in your life, because you don't know what they've got themselves. So you have to get them something that's a bit off the beaten track, that it's not an obvious one to get. Perhaps a book like Running Through Corridors, or something like that. Yes, I need to produce books that people actually wouldn't want to buy because they don't actually want them, but wouldn't be a bad Christmas present because they don't not want them. That's sort of where I position myself in the gap between the desirable and the not undesirable. That's where I exist, in that comfy little area of output. And, I know my place. My place now is to bed. So thanks very much for listening to me banging on about The Visitation. But now I shall take my leave. The visit is over.